Hello athletes! Today I'm going to just quickly run through how to change a spare inner tube. So we've been biking along and we notice that we have a flat. The first thing that we need to do is have the proper tools. You should always carry with you an inner tube, 2 tire levers, and a CO2 canister with inflator. If you're at home, you can also use a bike pump. So the first thing we're going to do is get off our bike and flip it over onto the seat and handlebars. I'm doing the rear tire today because it is the most complicated. The first is remove the quick release or through axle. We then want to look at the rear derailleur and move it out of the way so that the bike tire can drop out. We now have the wheel isolated. The first thing we want to do is find the inner tube inflator valve and make sure that it doesn't have a ton of pressure. We then unseat the tire by working the furthest away from the valve that we can. We will grab our 2 tire levers, and you'll notice that there's a little curved edge on that tire lever. We want to wedge that underneath the tire, what is called the bead. We'll wedge the second one 3 to 4 inches away. We then want to press downward pressure to pop the bead over top of the rim. We then slide the tire levers around the rim to unseat the entire bead on one side of the tire. We leave the other side attached to the wheel. We can then access the inner tube and pull it out. Remember, you have the valve that goes through the rim, so you might have to release a placement screw and then pull the valve through the rim. We've now removed the damaged inner tube. Please do not discard this on the side of the road. Keep it with you and throw it out when you get home. Now check your wheel to make sure that there is no debris in the tire. If it was a thorn or a piece of glass, you want to make sure that you're careful and slow so that you don't cut yourself, but you also remove what caused the damage in the first place. We then take our new inner tube and we unroll it. You'll find the valve, remove the valve cap, and also remove the placement screw. We then find the hole where the valve can pass through the rim. Another thing that I like to do is look for the wording on the tire itself. I like to move this so that it is right above the valve. This allows me, if I'm inflating my tires in the future or I have another flat, I can easily find where the valve is. So now that the writing has lined up with my valve, it's easily identifiable. I then take the uninflated inner tube and I seat it around the outer edges of the tire. I then start placing the bead of the tire back within the rim, and I slowly work my way away from the valve and around the tire to make sure that the inner tube is within the tire and the tire bead is seated. When I have about 4 to 6 inches left, I will get my tire lever again. Make sure that you don't catch the inner tube between the rim and your tire lever. Put the curled part of the tire lever on the rim and use leverage to pop the bead up and over the rim. Now both beads of the tire are seated along the rim. I'll find my valve and I'll start from there working around to make sure that the inner tube is not caught between the bead of the tire and the rim. If we inflate the tire when it is pinched, this will cause another flat, especially when using CO2 because it forcefully adds air. When I see that the inner tube is nice and set within the tire, I will open the valve, get my CO2 canister and inflator, I'll make sure that the inflator is closed, and then I will add my CO2. I will press it onto the valve and then open the valve so that the CO2 inflates the tire. If I have a track pump, I will place the track pump on the valve, add a few pumps of air just to barely inflate the inner tube. At this point, I'll quickly check again to make sure that the inner tube is not pinched between the tire and the rim. I will begin to inflate the tire to its desired pressure. The desired pressure is completely dependent on the width of the tire and the weight of the rider. When you get to about 60 or 70 psi, you may hear a loud snap. This is completely normal, and it's the tire reseating on the rim. It just happened there. I will continue to pump until I get to the desired pressure. I will then remove the pump, close the valve, return the valve placement screw, and then add the valve dust cap. Your tire is ready to be returned to the bike. Again, we have to remove the rear derailleur out of the way. Make sure that the chain is on our rear cassette and settle the bike tire in the dropouts. Here my chain came off the front chain ring, so I just quickly return the chain to the chain ring. I then get my through axle or quick release and make sure that it is closed and tightly set. If you have a bike that uses rear brake calipers, make sure that you test the brakes to make sure they are fully functioning and closed. We are now ready to ride. We return our tools in case we get another. We pick up our broken inner tube and carry it with us.